Welcome, everybody. We've been so excited to think about this workshop and see you all, meet you all. If we don't know you already, we were asked by the Rasmussen Foundation to provide one of these workshops for all you fabulous Rasmussen Project awardees, and specifically with the focus on career learning or scaling up your career. So we'd like to welcome you. Bunnell Street Arts Center is a nonprofit arts organization located in Homer, Alaska, but serving the state of Alaska and beyond. We're located at Tuget on the shore within the boundaries of, yeah, that's right, um, within the boundaries of the Ninilchik Village tribe. We've learned so much from Indigenous artists in this area and beyond, and we're just really grateful to meet you and continue doing this work and finding how we can serve artists the best we can. So, we started out this workshop with a bit of a survey to you all about what you really wanted to focus on when we talk about career and scaling up your career. Lots of different responses, but some big themes, a lot around sort of the business end of your work. How do you reach financial sustainability? How do you manage your time? How do you market? How do you find your audiences? A lot around networking opportunities. Where do you meet people? Grant opportunities, exhibiting opportunities, publishing opportunities, and also kind of collaboration opportunities among other artists in the state and beyond. And then kind of a set of other skills, balancing your emotional and mental health and the work that you do, confidence in communication and collaboration, negotiation, advocating for yourself and beyond. So what we've come up with to answer some of those questions was sort of a three-part workshop for you from three different perspectives. One from this art center with Asia Freeman, who's our artistic director and curator, and myself, Adele Person, who is the executive director here. And then with two marvelous artists that we'll introduce when it's their turn to sort of share. Lily Hope, who's calling in from Juneau, and Jeremy Pataki, who's calling in from Anchorage on his way to Seward for a poetry festival. And I'd like to start just kind of, I think about the challenges that you all have as individual artists very similarly to the way we are challenged sometimes as a nonprofit organization. We have a mission and the work that we want to do, and then kind of a whole lot of what I call the under iceberg, the work that supports that work. And so for every wonderful program that we have in the front, every exhibit that we present or artist in residency, there's a lot of marketing and staff meetings and fundraising and budget creations. And I think that sort of has a parallel to you all in that as artists. As a nonprofit, we think about contributed income, so grants and donations, which I think you all have sort of parallels as well as artists, and then also earned income, whether it's the selling of artwork, providing services and collecting fees from it. And I think there's parallels there. We wanted to share a resource that we've used to kind of gauge how we're doing in serving artists and providing equitable compensation. It's called Wage, and we wanted to share it with you all. And it's just kind of a great resource that this organization has put together to see, to sort of think what you should be paid. What it asks from a nonprofit's end is to sort of put in your income, and then you can see what you really should pay. What in to sort of at the scale of your organization. Maybe you're a very, very beginning nonprofit work organization. What you should compensate. So here, for example, is a museum in Miami. They have a budget of $22 million. And so this calculator kind of is like, well, then you should probably be paying an artist $12,000 for an exhibition. And it has, for a talk, for a commission. So we thought we'd share this as a resource as a way to kind of open the conversation and let you use it as you think about finding that sustainability and scaling up your career. So without talking too much, I'm going to turn it over to Asia, and then we'll talk with Lily and Jeremy later on in this presentation, and then we'll have 30 minutes at the end for a kind of an open discussion and questions and answers.
Great to see you all. As Adele said, I'm Asia Freeman, Bunnell's artistic director, and I work in a curatorial capacity. I would say, and I'm a co-founder of Bunnell. Bunnell was founded about 32 years ago by and for artists, which says a great deal about what my passion is, who I feel like I'm working for, and why I'm doing it. Like many folks living in rural areas of Alaska, we were underserved in terms of venues for artists. And so we have really built this thing from the ground up with artists, learning, collaborating, revising. We have a super iterative process, and we're really transparent about it. Our goal is to sustain relationships with artists, to build a strong and deep sector, and to learn and practice what equity really means. What we find is that it means being really transparent, being willing and to listen, and being solicitous of artists' feedback, and so we can all grow together. As the artistic director, I participate in a variety of statewide, local, and national conversations where there are really deep conversations about elevating artists' power and building equity in this sector. And I believe that what it really comes down to is making transparent agreements, being upfront about those agreements, and doing our best to communicate the expectations that we have when it comes to things like timelines, the marketing materials that we need, the public engagement expectations that we have, whether a person is in a residency, an exhibition, teaching through artists in the schools, and so forth. So I am going to paste into the chat, hopefully, some documents and talk a little bit about what we really attempt to do. But I'll say broadly speaking, our goal in sharing these is to make clear what we feel like constitutes a professional partnership so that we can serve you and so that you can grow. Our idea is we put forth what we need, and in that we convey what we expect from an artist in return, so that is like a contract in good faith, but it's also one that is even meant for revision, because we present the contract, the artist reads it, and sometimes they say, well, we have a little situation here. A really good example is, I'm coming from Canada, and I don't think it's going to work for me to be paid, but I'm going to tell you up front, I'm going to have these huge material costs for my residency. Can we name these material costs as real costs here and revise the contract accordingly? And we do what we need to do to make it really work. So we're learning from artists and pivoting as we need to and growing all the time. So let me go into chat. Sorry, I'm just like trying to do a little much. Okay, so there's a whole bunch of stuff, some contracts. Maybe something that we could look at first is our AAR contract, because this one kind of shows you right out front, what our mission is. The program that we're speaking to, this is Alaska AIR, our international residency program, and the themes that we expect artists to address, like inclusion, sustainability, skills sharing, and so forth. We're clear on the dates that we want you to come and we want to spell those out in this little box right here. This is what you're doing and when you're doing it. It's amazing how much these things evolve. You know, as a staff, we meet weekly, we discuss what's coming up, and there are these constant little revisions. And that, as I said, that really that iterative process, which we understand to be the artistic process as well, is as Adele says, a way that we like mirror and reflect and kind of work in a real parallel fashion to be mutually supportive. We speak about what our lodgings are, what is provided, what our studio is, how much space there is, when the artist has access, when the public has access, and what other kind of events are happening in our space. We talk up front about what our travel provisions are. You know, reimbursement up to $1,000 round trip ticket to Anchorage, and then the options that you have for travel to get to Homer. We're clear about our stipend, which is $2,000 a month, and how we'll put that out upon arrival and then before departure. We have a clear materials budget of $250. And then this is a part I just wanted to pause because it's really universal between all of our agreements. These press requirements, which include an image suitable for online and print publication. And so this is a high quality image. This is a professional image. It's an image of your artwork in whatever form it takes. And we want it to be the best that you can provide to us. We've met artists where they may be limited, and we've taken pictures of their work. We have little facilities, small bright boxes, and professional artists who come in with lights. But we need to we want those things, and we want artists, you know, to understand ahead of time so that if they need support, we can help provide that. We're real clear about the program description and the biographical statement that we need. And, you know, honestly, we're literally and always constantly sort of revising these things. Just last week, we said, should it be 300 words to 150, or should we really be specific and say 150? You know, it's like this process is so iterative for all of us. And as artists on staff, we're like learning and responding to what seems like feasible, valuable, viable. And then, of course, social media and how we want to be a collaborator with the artists in the social media space. Finally, code of conduct and a link to our handbook. The next stage of all of that information in terms of how we're reaching out to the public is something I feel like you all should know really as well and be prepared for. That an artist statement will be quoted, you know, it'll be 100, it'll be 150, it'll be 200 words. We'll describe what our agreements are in terms of how you'll engage the public here. For example, in our upcoming residency, we're having this solography workshop and we're having a reception open to the public, and the artists know that when they're expected, what they're expected to do. And then we include their biographies. We try to give the artists an opportunity to review this, you know, before this is published. And this kind of brings me to my next point that I wanted to talk about in this conversation, which is what you should do if you're working with an organization that has not, you know, front loaded these agreements and contracts, because that happens all the time too, right? Especially in Alaska, where we have like everything from national or internationally visible museums to small and emerging residency programs that don't even offer a stipend. And those exist as well in the international context. I'm going to one myself in Italy, and it doesn't offer a stipend. I've got to come up with my travel and figure out how my living expenses will work out. So what we want you to know is that you can see these contracts for examples of how you can be prepared and help your presenter do better work. If they don't provide you a contract and ask you for those specific things, you can create a template. You can borrow ours, and you can present those things so that the way that you are portrayed meets your own standards as well. If you don't, you're really at risk of being misrepresented. And so, and potentially, I guess, we're weaving something together, right, as a sector. And so if you can share, as artists have generously, patiently, and probably sometimes in exasperation, shared with us, that's how we've grown, like any relationship. I think that really covers it, but I hope that you'll look at those links, just to look at them really briefly or to speak to these links. So I put in our artist in residence contract, our exhibition contract, our press release example, but then I put two more links, which I don't really feel like we have time to explore now, but I hope that you will. This new movement called artistcorporations.com, which speaks to why artists should consider incorporating for self-protection, for protection of their creative property, and for financial stability and security. It's a really interesting movement, which is originating in Colorado, and there's a 10-minute TED Talk at this link. I think you'll appreciate that. And then the last link I pasted in is a decolonization rider. This is really deep systemic work, which we've been really fortunate to be a part of through the the work of Emily Johnson and her international, you know, uh, work on creating new futures as a result, as a gig worker, of having multiple contracts canceled during COVID. And while that in particular might not reflect long-standing uh, exclusionary practices that Indigenous artists have faced worldwide, it kind of underscored the instability of the gig worker, and in particular, the kinds of agreements that should apply to the entire sector, whatever your media may be. So this link to decolonization rider studies basically gives you a way as a cultural worker, as an artist, to learn more and help to create equitable agreements. In this way, I think we as organizations, as a state, and as a world have a lot to learn from long-standing and sustainable practices of Indigenous communities that reflect a decolonized worldview, So let's see. Somebody says they're only seeing the wage link. Did I not hit send? Oh, I'm so naughty. I'm so sorry. I didn't hit the send button. Now you have the links. Thank you for the feedback, Sarah, letting me know you didn't see them. So I'll stop there and we'll move into our presentations. I think that we can talk more in the Q&A session about some of this stuff.
Thanks so much, Asia. That's great. And thanks for hitting those links. I was like, is it just me? I can't see them either. So now we're going to turn it over to the first of our presenting artists. Jeremy Pataki is a poet and writer and publisher. He's worked in the nonprofit sector and as an independent artist in Alaska and beyond. His poetry and essays have appeared in numerous reviews and contributed to several anthologies. And he's directed the nonprofit Wrangell Mountain Center and 49 Writers, who is a founding board member. He's helped develop and manage programs for the Rasmussen Foundation and the Alaska State Council on the Arts, Anchorage Museum, and he's the co-publisher of the magazine of Edible Alaska, among many, many other wonderful accomplishments. Jeremy, thanks so much for joining us, and we're really excited to hear what you have to share with us today.
Thank you, Adele, and thank you, Asia, too. I love Bunnell Street Art Center, and it's a big honor to be invited. And thank you and hi also to Cheryl with the Rasmussen Foundation. And congrats to everyone else, big time, for earning Rasmussen Foundation Individual Artist Awards. It's a huge accomplishment. Thank you for making Alaska richer for your work. I'll share a bit about my backstory. The invitation sort of sounded sort of like coming a lot from like the arts admin side. I'm a writer and I've done a lot of arts admin as well. So I'll kind of, that's kind of where I'm coming from. So I'll share a bit about my backstory, about my maybe unconventional working life, and a little about my life as a creative writer, and then I'll try to underline a few takeaways, and I'll start some slides up here in a moment. I grew up in rural Eastern Washington and North Idaho. I read constantly as a kid. I started writing very early, despite next to no exposure to it in school. But I was lucky to be around adults who read and played music. And by high school, I was somehow devouring literary journals and books of poetry. And I pretty early on decided I wanted to study writing and get out of the place that I knew. And ended up in Bellingham, Washington for college, drawn by both the Salish Sea, which I had a little exposure to growing up to, and to Western's writing program. And those two priorities for me, place and art, were really already kind of guiding choices I was making at like age 17 when I graduated high school. Found my people in college, loved the coursework, loved catching folks like Cat Power and Pearl Jam in small venues, loved, early taste exposures to contemporary art and dance and sculpture. The college, small kid from a small town going to college thing. And made a point of building my academic schedules such that they would not interfere with the weekly poetry open mic down at Stewart's Coffee House. As a sophomore, I talked my way into upper division seminar classes with a visiting Canadian professor, the poet Gary Geddes. I ended up taking 5 of his seminars total, starting with one called The Poet's Novel. Gary integrated communal dinners into every class. The classes were once a week for 4 or 5 hours. But he would start each term off by inviting the students on unsanctioned long weekends out to his oceanside home on the west coast of Vancouver Island, about a day away by car and ferry, where we'd walk to the lighthouse, go tide pooling, cook, share meals, talk literature and writing, laugh, party some. And as Gary hoped, we definitely would bond and form friendships and respect that would kind of dissolve our inhibitions and get enough rapport going early to jumpstart an excellent classroom for the rest of the term. And then we'd head back to the United States and get together once a week, and it was just, the classes were amazing. Gary brought a lot of, like, dozens and dozens of Canadian authors to Bellingham over those years and secured funding to lure them down and house them. And he included us students as much as he could in that network. And while he was teaching us about writing and reading, he really was modeling how to cultivate creative communities, how to bridge distance, and how to be a kind and generous literary citizen. And of course, all the while he was writing and publishing his own work too. I'm going to fire up this sharer here. Is that working? Looks good.
Yep.
So outside of studying and writing, I hiked and walked the docks, ogling sailboats and kind of dreaming my way up the coast. I'd wanted to sail the Inside Passage to Alaska since I was a kid. And I'd briefly visited Southeast Alaska after high school, which just kind of whetted my appetite. And eventually I bit the bullet and bought a little cheap fixer-upper with the help from the Canadian exchange rate at the time, and spent about 2 years fixing up that boat and finishing college before it was time to shove off. And I recruited my oldest friend to spend most of that summer sailing with me. Now he's a world-class professional musician, and at the time, taking an entire summer off from practicing was a huge setback for him. Nights at anchor, he'd listen to music on headphones, reading along in musical scores and mentally practicing since he couldn't practice for real. And I sat across the little table inside the boat, writing and reading. And over the summer, we had long-ranging conversations about art and ideas and creative practice and the resonance of the role of our respective art forms in our lives as relatable practices, plus the kind of intensities of our shared experiences that we were having, sort of embedded itself in me as something to always seek out. That our deep immersion in place that summer, traveling for months at like between about 2 and maybe 5.5 miles an hour, coupled with enough unfettering of mind to go equally deep into thought and art for months, cemented itself in my mind as a kind of ideal goal state to pursue. It was a summer outside, moving under elemental power through wild places, full of indelible experiences, punctuated with hours of very calm, with not much to do but sit with our thoughts during the day, hand on the tiller, eyes ahead and around for hazards. And after several weeks, my brain started doing a kind of inventory during the long quiets, just pulling up memories and things that I probably would have never remembered again otherwise. And my body became very attuned to the environment, not just as a matter of survival, which it was, but also as a form of pleasure. It was an extremely productive summer on a creative level. The following spring, I drove up to Anchorage, which is where I am right now. I live in McCarthy. I'm on the way to Seward for the Poetry Fest, so I'm eddied out here. And after this call, I'll hit the road. But that spring, I drove up to Anchorage sight unseen with my then girlfriend, and we planned to stay 1 year and then leave and go to grad school outside. And after about a month of falling in love with the area, we thought, okay, 2 years and then school. I got accepted to the MFA program in Missoula, and she chose Colorado. And 4 years had passed since we graduated college, and it was time to level up. But even when I went to Montana, I was still commuting up to Alaska for summer work out in McCarthy at a guide service. And the time reading and writing and paying attention that I had done on my boat in the subsequent years since in Alaska were great for the writing muscles. And that headspace came in handy too, living in a plywood shack on the guide service campus where I wrote a lot of my book of poetry, taking drafts back to work on in Montana. Missoula was a dream. I ran a reading series and helped staff the Lit Journal there and worked as a writing tutor and an instructor. Had an incredible community and stayed an extra winter there after I finished my MFA. And I was teaching college and also teaching poetry to third graders in an after-school program. And my time there overlapped with the lifespan of the New Lakes Reading and Performance series, which was one of the most brilliant, impactful, curated community projects I've ever known. Even though I left Alaska for that MFA down in the States with every intention to return, I actually agonized some about whether or not to permanently move back north. I was definitely wrong, I would say, to think of it that simply then, but the prospect at the time felt like a turn away from a lot of professional opportunities that I was well poised to pursue at the time down south. But my sense of place dictated heeding the Alaska call, and I'm glad I did that, made the decision to commit. What made me anxious was the idea of kind of starting over in a place where I didn't know any other writers, really, and I knew I would ache for some of the aspects of the Missoula life. I had my summer job out of McCarthy lined up, found a room and a house to start that fall in Anchorage. I had plans to sub and freelance write. I had my shiny new MFA degree in hand, and I was hoping to find a job. And I was getting to know around that time Andromeda Romano-Lax and Deb Vaness, a couple writers co-editing a collaborative blog called 49 Writers No Moose. And I wrote for them a little bit. Also signed up for a writing class with Bill Sherwana in hopes of meeting other writers and just to keep the juices flowing. And got involved with a group led by Bruce Farnsworth, actively trying to build a multidisciplinary arts center in Mountain View. I pretty much lived at Claudia Brothers by tidal wave, and that helped get to know people too. I started a little reading series, Still North Reading and Performance series, inspired by Brandon's New Lakes back in Missoula. And I was freelancing, like I say, and just trying to find my footing and my people here. It just so happened that fall that Wrangell Mountain Center, an interdisciplinary arts and science nonprofit I'd orbited during my summers in McCarthy, opened up their search for a new ED. It seemed meant to be. I applied and eventually got hired in November of 2008. And eventually, Deb Andromeda and I worked together to launch a new statewide literary nonprofit that kind of grew out of the momentum they picked up with that blog. And the center was initially called 49 Alaska Writing Center, later shortened to 49 Writers, filling what felt like a void in Alaska at the time. And for a decade, it was a major focus of my life, initially as a board member. Meanwhile, in those first years back from the MFA, I started submitting my manuscript once it felt viable enough. I was a Tupelo finalist before it was accepted by University of Alaska Press. I was overworking at the WMC when my first book of poetry, Overwinter, was published. I took the time to do a little book tour, but fixing up and running the Wrangell Mountain Center was the primary focus of my life by far. And I started to kind of learn how hard it is to do a good job of being both an artist and an administrator. I loved it though. I loved facilitating the gamut of our place-based programming and shoring up the ops side of a beloved nonprofit. And I loved integrating science with art and learning so much from experts all around. If I was going to leave it in better shape than I had found it, as I hoped to do, though, I felt that I needed to give it a minimum 5-year commitment, which was a long time. They'd been suffering from a turnover problem. And yeah, I just felt extra incentive, I think, to do a good job too, since I was having, inclinations to make McCarthy more of a permanent home place. Threw myself into it with vigor. I had a lot to learn. I pitched the board to pay for me to attend the certificate in nonprofit management training with the Foraker group, and also took classes on QuickBooks and such. Slowly started building a skill set that would serve really in all aspects of life thereafter. The choice to commit to the Ringham Mountain Center in McCarthy came with a lot of opportunity costs. Just like earlier, when I felt like I could have stayed in the lower 48 and pursued, greater success and still chose Alaska because I'd realized how place is one of my non-negotiables, I felt like I could do very well in certain ways if I were to commit to a year-round Anchorage existence. At one point, Nina Kemple, actually, who was the director at the time of Humanities Forum, reached out and asked me to have lunch with her. I had no idea what to expect. And she basically proposed that I consider becoming a deputy director there, which was an amazing opportunity and offer. And it kind of was a non-starter because I was really trying to be in McCarthy and I was set up there. So gradually my McCarthy seasons there grew and grew. Just for fun, there's a little pin of my property in the woods where I started building my place in 2012. Now it's become a full-time home. Earlier in my time working for the WMC, though, Andromeda, Deb, and I founded 49 Riders, as I said, and started building that out. Andromeda was our first ED. She went hard and well, but after only 1 year, she and her family left Alaska. I think she learned quicker than me that EDing and serious writing are hard to balance. By then, we built out the board quite a bit. She stepped off of that to staff. Deb took over similarly when she went and was awesome until she and her husband decided to move outside too. So our wee little board amazingly found Linda Ketchum, who took the helm and was ED for 3 solid years. She was great. And we were doing well, got a lot of Alaska-based grants and funding from the NEA, and we're thriving. And it was interesting at the time, trying to wear 2 nonprofit hats those years. One as a board member for something I'd helped found and cared a lot about, and one as ED of another that likewise felt very personal and close. Over the years staffing the Ringham Mountain Center, I worked long hours year-round. My writing did flag, I'd say, while I burned the candle at both ends. But we grew a ton, and so did I. Big capital campaign, expanded the campus and staff, got things kind of stabilized. And I'm proud to this day of all that we accomplished and the way we set some new benchmarks. But I was writing more grant proposals and program descriptions and emails and board reports and grant reports than essays or poems. And the more I learned through trainings and experience and talking to others and some mentorship about how roles and responsibilities between nonprofit governance and staff are supposed to go, the more clarity and language I had around all the ways that those before me were being somewhat taken advantage of. And I was a little bit of an accomplice in that. The job kind of started to sour. It was about 5 years. But I wanted to keep operating in McCarthy and the Copper Basin and thought I'd learned a lot about that lay of the land over the years. And I'd been a Rasmussen grantee through work over the years too, and Ringham Mountain Center had hosted a United States Artist Awardee as an artist in residence at the Ringham Mountain Center one summer under Rasmussen auspices. That was the novelist Justin Torres. So I requested a meeting with a Rasmussen Foundation program officer and pitched a consulting role for myself that surely they wouldn't be able to refuse, I hoped. And he practically laughed and pretty much said, no, that's a non-starter, but there's another possibility that you might be a perfect fit for. Do you want to hear about that? And the next thing I knew, I began a pretty exciting gig helping to manage a new artist residency program, a network that paired orgs in Alaska with orgs outside to host and pay artists of all disciplines while funding 2-month-long residencies for them. And the work lasted about 3 years, took me all over the country and around Alaska, and led to more opportunities later. Learned a lot, made some great friendships, had a great time. I also was approached with offers when I started doing consulting from Anchorage Museum and Alaska State Council on the Arts too, which I accepted. It was a great few years in my personal life and professional life, but it required spending a lot of time in Anchorage and a lot of time traveling both in and out of state, even as far as London and the Great Kobuk Sand Dunes in Northwest Arctic. And I was still on the 49 Riders board, but starting to get burned out. Linda, our wonderful ED, decided to leave the job, leave her husband, and leave Alaska and leave the United States and move back to Europe. The now larger 49 board really struggled to find the right staffing fit, and I already had my eye on the boardroom door anyway when I was asked to consider serving as interim ED for a year, which I agreed to and ended up extending for close to 5. Lots of good memories, zillions of events. And eventually, a lot was changing at Rasmussen Foundation. Their board, among other things, chose to end the artist residency program that had been running for those 3 years. Meanwhile, 49 Writers was stable and doing well, but I was just working part-time. And I pitched a project pairing Alaska writers with individual artist award recipients to create accessible profiles of their work. And Rasmussen gave 49 writers a contract, not a grant, but a fee for service that covered 49 writers overhead and paid me to coordinate and edit those profiles. And most of the funds went to paying writers to write. And it was really exciting to support, artists and build cross-disciplinary literacy across the state. When all goes well, as you all know, in a small arts nonprofit, the sky's the limit, but man, a lot can go wrong. As the pandemic approached, internal tensions between the two of us on staff and certain board members started to run high. I'll spare you the details, but suffice it to say that our big contract with Rasmussen was preventably canceled. The market's free fell, that revenue vanished, but so did our plans for, status quo in-person programming thanks to the lockdowns. It was time to get out of there. So I embraced the small business for-profit life in full for the first time, still steering with those two compasses of place and art, or trying to while still needing to earn some money to pay the bills. Not a lot of money in publishing, granted. Magazines and books are the main things I'm doing. And my little endeavors, do remind me of a lot of ways of my nonprofit work, but I own the fruits of my labor. I get to live where I want. And I've been making progress toward recovering some of that headspace that I enjoyed that summer on the boat. So as was said, I'm co-publishing Edible Alaska magazine, and I'm the founding publisher at Porphyry Press, the most remote book publisher in North America. And I also quietly publish a little local visitor's guide out there to help make ends meet. I know I've really just glossed a little look back at my career as a working writer in need of a job, but I want to offer a few takeaways for artists from one who's worked with a lot of artists through several angles and capacities over the year, for what it's worth. That's my little writing desk view in McCarthy. Learn your priorities and commit to them. Decline opportunities that distract from them. You hear everyone say, you got to learn to say no, but it's so true. Before leaving Montana, I came to terms with the idea that there are better places for me to be than academia. And part of that involved recognizing that place and finding the kind of creative communities I craved were essentials for me, non-negotiables. Where I live could not be a function of where I could find work. Place comes first for me. So however you tick, it's worth figuring out what your deep down drivers are and embracing them. Determine how much and what kind of pain is worth your while, and only abide it on at least your own terms. If there must be pain, and there will be, at least be strategic with it, so you grow into pleasure and betterment in the end, more able to own what you've done and what you will do instead of being owned or rented. Work for yourself, work for them, and for the money all at once, but never just for the money. And for God's sake, ask for what you want. This should be obvious, but it is amazing how many people really need to learn this one. You ought to be generous and think of it as a form of generosity in giving agencies, orgs, people the opportunity to say no if they need to. It rarely hurts to ask. Don't assume an answer on their behalf by staying silent. Don't be meek. Make your case for that override code for the full class. Demand the raise. Remember that if you're in dialogue at all, you're probably in a position to help them meet their own mission. They need you, which means you have power. Ask for what you want. Create the community you desire. As they say, if you build it, they will come. I'm still close friends with people I met through my early Anchorage efforts, starting that reading series, people I've gotten to know through 49 Writers. Another case in point, I like to think of Michael Walsh in this photograph with his love of experimental film. So much would be missing from the lives of his community without his guidance on expanding their attention to new to them art forms. Try on repeat. Total cliche, I know, but it's worth repeating. There's a reason we talk about artistic practices. If it was perfectly easy to get from where you are to where you are going, you and everyone would already be there. You are a tiny boat with no electronics, moving slowly, and you will see and do a lot more than those chumps on cruise ships speeding by, throwing a wake they're not even cognizant of in a place they don't understand. Mind your basics to stand out. Commonplace daily care should not be taken for granted and does not come naturally to everyone. If you're awake and show it, people will notice, and it does help. Easy things like remembering people's faces and names and engaging when you run into them unexpectedly. Sending thank you notes, giving credit where credit is due, playing fair, and just making it easy and satisfying to work with you if you want to differentiate from the crowd a little along the lines of some of what Asia was saying. Also, as always, disruptive change is constant all around. Some of the most rarefied institutions in Alaska have very short memories or lifespans. So you got to be your own foundation. You could easily be around longer than a lot of them, and it's ultimately on each of us to tap reliable internal creative wells and to find meaning in life as an artist practicing in Alaska. And not that I get a vote, but to any who are flight risks, like so many have been before us, I encourage you to embrace the chance to stay in Alaska and commit or recommit to the Alaska creative life. Give credit where credit is due, of course, and give yourself permission to take credit when your work's positive influence is also a deep expression of your vision and creative ethic. I think the ethos of the silent and invisible leader or community member or artist empowering others is a little bit going the way of the outdated idea that nonprofits should be ashamed of their overhead costs. It's just not how business, nonprofit or otherwise, works. I came up thinking my job as a leader was to be the invisible architect of amazing programs and the silent support for dedicated staff and the felt but rarely seen backbone. But as an artist with day jobs, I in some ways made a living short shrifting my own practice, including ineligibilizing, making myself ineligible for some of the things like individual artist awards for some of those years. Anyway, if I had erred more against anonymity in some of those roles, it might have been easier for the fellow forces who wanted the fruits of that labor to persist in the world to make it so. So own your own story. You are in it and you are of it and it's yours. So claim it and tell it. And finally, as a writer and a reader and a publisher in a supposedly free country, I'll close with my friend John Mackay's t-shirt advice, which applies or can be translated across art forms, I think. Free people write, publish, sell, buy, and read books. Cheers to Rasmussen Foundation and Bunnell. Thank you for supporting artists in Alaska. I'll stop there.
Super. Thank you so much, Jeremy. That was amazing. Yeah, all the hearts. Fabulous. Well, now we'd love to turn to another visionary artist. Lily Hope is a cultural leader, a mentor, a community collaborator. She is dedicated to strengthening the Northwest Coast textile traditions through collective practice and intergenerational learning. She is the founder of Lily Hope Weaver Studio and the creative director of the upcoming Northwest Coast Textile Symposium. She creates spaces where artists and knowledge holders and communities gather, learn, and build together. and just carries such wonderful responsibility, reciprocity, and cultural integrity. And we've seen her here through Bunnell mentoring other artists and just giving of herself so much. So thank you so much for joining us today, Lily. Really great to have you here.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, I've gotten to come to Homer a couple times for various things, and when I fall in love with Alaska, even though I live in Southeast, Homer is like, that's my retirement plan. Some cold dipping in the Kachemak Bay, and oh my goodness. Oh, that omelet, y'all, the omelet, if you haven't had the omelet in the little cafe next to Bunnell Street Arts with the feta and mushrooms and spinach and oh my goodness, caramelized onions. All right. So now you're like, now I gotta have myself an omelet. You're welcome. Hey, I'm Lily Hope. I'm a mother of 5 children. I'm an artist and a mother and a teacher. Those are snowballed together. And people are like, how do you do it all? I don't do it all at the same time. It's very, very, this is now my mother hat, and this is now my artist hat. This is now my community support hat. I also used to drink a lot of whiskey, thinking that that was a great plan of how to cope with life and the volume of things, because I am a single parent of 5. The father has them very few hours, and I am 99% of my children's everything. So it's a lot, and I don't drink anymore. And I lay on the floor a lot and cry. I should say less than that. I also lift heavy. I get outside. So what Jeremy was saying about being in the nature, I just learned today that nature is exceptional at holding your grief. So if you are processing big feelings, you just get yourself into some hemlock, the needles of the hemlock trees, and lay in the moss and give it over. So whatever heavy stuff you're carrying, just bring it out to the trees and the ocean. I want to share with you some tips and tricks about how I read as a successful artist. Did a cute little storytelling for an event that was recorded back in December. I think it's called the Winter Fire Showcase at the University of Alaska Southeast. You can search it on YouTube if you want and get the full rundown, but it starts out with, I'm a real life artist. I have 12,000 followers on Instagram. I make 100% of my income from making and selling and teaching the art that I was given as a child. I've been featured in the Smithsonian. I'm one of 6 Indigenous artists at the first all-Indigenous Smithsonian Renwick Biennial. I've been featured in First Peoples magazine, lots of articles written about me in Smithsonian magazine, and all sorts of other reaches, Humanities Forum, cover art for all sorts of things. I've woven 5 or maybe 6 Chilkat dancing blankets that each take 2.5 years to complete. I've built relationships with foundations and institutions and entities, human beings who are running these entities by remembering dogs' names and partners' names and the human connection that is important in all of that. So on every single count, you can say, oh, this artist is really doing it. She's making it. And I'm so exhausted. A writer friend of mine, Summer Custer, if you're following her on Substack, Summer was like, when I grow up, like I look to you as the pinnacle example of how to do it, how to make it. You're really making it, Lily, as an artist. And she's like, I can't wait to be where you are. And I said, please, Summer, don't reach for this as the thing to reach for. I am more not okay than I am okay. I mean, I'm surrounded by goodness, and I have a gratitude journal, and I get outside, and all of it is really good. And there is so much grief and heaviness and overwhelm. I don't wish this life on anyone. So do it better than me. by taking Jeremy's advice and collaborating with Asia and Adele and reaching out to the people who are finding more life balance than I have found. I would say that just in the last 10 months, I've come into I think I can hold this without breaking space. So 19 years of breaking a lot, drinking a lot, raging a lot, sitting in cold water a lot to be able to handle. So, yeah. How's that for an intro? Don't try to be like this. With some really great tricks here. That is not the thing I'm supposed to be sharing. So hold on a second. I wasn't supposed to say all of that yet. Just kidding. No. Real talk. We need more of this real talk of like what you see out here in social media or what you're reading over there. Don't even, that is the highlight reel, and you're missing 99% of, yeah, anyway. Yeah, right. Thanks. Yeah, refreshing, validating. More of this real conversation because, no, it isn't. It is not all cupcakes and rainbows. Although I love, love, love rainbows. Here you go. Oh, creative success. I hope that you come away with this with the feeling that you can have it all if you ask for it and you keep the vision strong and you show up for yourself. There's a little postcard on my fridge and it says, radical success requires radical self-care. And I think that was what was missing in my mother's life, who she worked 11 days a week, 27 hours a day. She would respond to emails at 2 a.m. She was not prioritizing the sustainability of it because you can't run on empty for years at a time without whiskey or meditation or cold dipping. And she was not prioritizing her own wellness. So she died at 60. That's 14 years from now. So let me see if I can live a little longer. Thanks for the example, Mama, of how not to do it. Respectfully, I love you. Time management. Who is the pro at this? Yes? Show me your hands now. Time management is so hard. How many of you feel the muse or the creative consciousness come through you every time you go to the studio, every time you are sitting in your creative space? I don't. I will sit here for hours and detail something instead of sitting in that space. Showing up and protecting your time, if it's every Friday or every Wednesday or only the 2 hours between 7 p.m. and 9 p.m. every single night, because that's why I'm doing my dishes and my kitchen is clean, so that I have those 2 hours. Whatever that is, you showing up and protecting that creative time, however many hours you get per week. Maybe you're working a full-time job and you only have Saturdays because you're going to Costco and meal prep on Sundays, right? That consistent showing up and non-negotiable, I am going to be here consistently, is a game changer for producing work, for sitting in this space. And sometimes you're gonna make stuff that's not really in that, like, yes, I did this awesome thing. Giving yourself time to play and create and explore is that is the juice of being an artist, right? Is it's not going to happen unless you protect those hours. So time management. Are you here? Did you show up again? Because you're gonna make beautiful things if you show up consistently. Marketing. Oh, this is my jam. All right. How many of you can think of a social media sharer, someone that you are following that is not just not just the art making part of it, right? And I want you to think of someone that's like, and sometimes they share photos of the flowers that they're smelling. And sometimes they share photos of their cat climbing all over their messy table and like affirms that my cat's climbing on my art table is like legit and allowed. And like, that is, I mean, I see you, right? We, the viewers of your work, want to know you, want to feel like we know you, right? So in your marketing, I want you to think about um, how much of your non-art making life you want to share. And you get to make this decision, right? There is no judgment on like whether like if my partner is going through kidney dialysis, do I want to put that on social media? Maybe, maybe not. If one of my kids is getting gallbladder surgery, I don't know why the surgeries are so present. My sister's kid is getting gallbladder surgery and she did not comment on it. And I was like, "Are you going to put that on social media?" She's like, "I don't know. I mean, do other people's kids have celiac disease and get gallbladder surgery?" Anyway, so I want you to think about what parts of your life. Is it cats? Is it your love of architectural photographs taken on an upward trajectory? Is it how often you get your toes painted and then your toes submerged in sand? Sorry, this is not a pitch for an OF page, an OnlyFans page, but consider the humanity that you yourself, the things that you love most, and share that with your viewers. Because okay, here's one. This is a bracelet made by Jared Galanin, not Nicholas Galanin, who is more famous. I gravitate toward Jared Galanin's work because the way he gives kudos or like big love, public love toward his wife, his current wife, and how he loves his blended family and how he shares about that. That's why I go back and continue to purchase Jared Galanin silver, because that feels rich to me. I mean, that feels like I want to support someone who is going to then lift his significant partner. Do you have speaker view on? I'm seeing Adele hide self view. Okay, just making sure that you can see my hands moving while you're doing this. Okay, so I'm going to go back to that. Hold on a second. Marketing. If you have a notebook next to you or a piece of paper or your phone with a notes app, I want you to jot down 2 or 3 things that you're going to share over the next 8 months on your social media that you're going to incorporate. Maybe it is your cat or your tiny cute chihuahua or the backside of your kids' head as they're helping you prepare materials. My children opt not to be on my socials very much. They said like 2 times a year if I can do that. They've just like from a safety standpoint, and I don't really need to be known as Lily Hope's kid. They've requested that, so I try to honor that. Always get your kids' permission if that's a thing. My partner also doesn't really love social media, so he's like, do you have to share that picture? So, yeah, think about a couple things that you can share that is not you making art, your finished art, your art supplies, your, those things. So, because we really want, you'll be surprised at how many people will come back to you for the content that is not your art. We want to feel the resonant humanity between us. Administration. Ugh. I made this up as you can't not afford to have help. My career is so different, and my mental health and my capacity for making dinner with my family is so different because 7 years ago, I hired an administrative assistant to come and sit next to me on my computer, on my emails, And she would read my emails from Rachel or read my emails from Asia or read my emails and say, oh, they're asking for a narrative of blah, blah, blah. Oh, they want your artist statement. Oh, they want whatever the administration was. She would sit next to me, started with 5 hours a week. I was paying her $20 an hour. She was a new mom. This was 5 hours away from her family that she was like, I can do something that contributes to the good in the world. And then she got support and she started working for 4 other artists at $100 a day, just 5 hours, right? So grandma was watching baby and she was making $500 a week with 5 different artists. And we each got 5 hours of administrative work or studio support. She was priming canvases for one of my painter friends. That's all she did, primed canvases or filled in little shapes. The volume of work that I got done and have continued to get done because I still have an administrative assistant who is now actually an executive producer because she also manages my calendar and flies me places. And I mean, like she's producing my life outside of children. You absolutely can't not afford to have help. Your deep creative work, that finding of the muse or that like creative flow space, can happen more often when you say, I'm going to find somebody. Maybe it's my high school neighbor friend, and I'm going to pay them 15 an hour or 18 an hour to do this work next to me while I'm doing menial repetitive tasks so that when this admin assistant isn't with me, I can do my deep work. And I don't have 5 hours of admin that is like crushing my mind space while I'm in this, like, I just need this to come through me. You can start small. You can start 5 hours a month if you want and see what that feels like because you can pay someone $100 a month to feel what it's like to have that time back. Because you know what no one's doing? No one is paying you to respond to emails. They are paying you to produce work. So if you can pay someone a small bit and then you get those 5 hours, total mental health changer, total deep work changer. I challenge you to try it, to just try it. Maybe it's your best girlfriend who wants to do it for free because she loves you, or a guy friend. Yeah, maybe it is the teenager. You can't not afford to have help. See how brilliant your life can be with a tiny bit of administrative support. Or maybe it is just prep work while you're doing the deep work. Portfolio development. My sister gave me feedback. She's kind of snarky. She is 8 years younger than me. She has done this better for longer. She had a bullet journal account on Instagram with 77,000 followers, and all of her photos were professionally curated. She has since dropped that account, which I was like, you what? 77,000. Anyway, once upon a time, she came at me and she said, your photos, frankly, are lame. They're bad. They suck. Do you want to be taken seriously as an artist? Please hire a professional photographer and use the same photographer over and over so that you don't have to think about, did Steve take this? Did Bob take that? Who was my photographer? Which luckily there is one here in Juneau. Her name is Sydney Akagi, and she took every single one of these photographs. And I will parallel that the administrative support and the professional photography are the top two things that blew my career out of the water, along with being a decent person who shows up when I say I'm going to show up. That is a huge part of it. But those two things, admin, photography, because we like beautiful things and we like the beautiful things to be documented in a specific way. Sydney Akagi took the photo of myself and these little children processing mountain goat hair on top of Mount Roberts here in Juneau. And like even that, I'm like, Also, who doesn't need photos of you and your partner or your dog or your cat or your people in your space, in your home, in your cabin, Jeremy, where you can share these pro photos and it just feels elevated, different, feels different. And from a grant application standpoint, me submitting photos that look like this compared to an iPhone photo with a textured blanket on the background of your earrings where you can't even read what is happening and is not of this place, like just that is going to give you a different leg up in applying for grants and opportunities, residencies. Huge, huge game changer. This one. We wove a series of masks and we said, you know what, we want these to be on the beach and document that these people all wove masks, these Native artists all wove masks during the pandemic. And someone said, are we going to wear regalia? And I was like, yes, we are going to wear regalia. So this happened during the pandemic. We went out of the beach because, of course, we can not wear masks outside, but we did for this picture. And this was one of the featured photographs for protection, adaptation, and resistance with Bunnell Street Arts in the catalog. Photographs matter. They matter. She also documents my smaller work professionally. This is Sydney Akagi's photos as well. Just a very different aesthetic. I mean, just you can't not take this seriously without like bum, 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 bum. I'm not trying to blow my own horn. I'm trying to say, like, if I look at this photograph and then some photographs of people who are using their iPhone, which here's the thing. I could have spent 90 hours learning to use my iPhone to take pictures like this, but I want to spend those 90 hours weaving Chilkat blankets that take 2,500 hours, right? I don't want to dedicate 90 hours or 40 hours to learning how to use my iPhone to take pictures like this. That is not I want to pay someone else to do it so that I can spend those hours making the art that makes change. This is the original Chilkat Protector mask cover photo for First American Art Magazine. And the literal feedback from the editor of this magazine said, we got 250 mask submissions in 2020 for the original call out for Indigenous artists to make masks in response to the pandemic. And the editor wrote back to me and she said, your photos that you submitted were the best of 250 Native artists in America who submitted work. So if that's not a little like, a little punch in the arm or a little kick in the shin for you to go get pro photos, put yourself or your work on the cover of the magazines you want to be on. That's it. Ready for Q&A. Yeah. Follow me at Lily Hope Weaver, although that might change to Lily Hope Artist or Lily Hope Printmaker, because maybe someday I won't be an artist or I won't be a weaver. No, I'll always be a weaver. No, we'll see. Weaver of story.
Thank you so much, Lily. That was amazing. And thank you for sharing, not like both what's gotten you to that story of success and the realities of how it doesn't always feel that way. We can definitely do more.
Mm-hmm.
Appreciate that so much.